Okay, so most business owners have no idea what kind of financial help they're actually getting. They hired someone, they're paying someone, but if you ask them right now, what does this person actually do in your business or for your business? They're kind of like, that's not a great response. A bookkeeper and an accountant are not the same thing. And the difference between the two can actually be the difference between you making a great decision and you just winging it. Okay. I know that sounds a little bit serious, but here's something I see play out in real businesses all the time. The owners who struggle the most aren't usually the ones with bad products or marketing. They're the ones who didn't have the right financial support at the right time. And by the time they figured that out, it was already really hard to turn around. So the goal today isn't to scare you, it's to make sure you actually know what you have, what it's doing for you, and what you might be missing. I'm going to explain to you exactly what a bookkeeper, an accountant, and a CFO are actually doing with your numbers, why the title someone gives themselves tells you almost nothing about the work they're really doing, how to finally know whether the financial help you have is actually moving your business forward or just keeping the lights on. So everything I know about bookkeeping and accounting, I learned by doing. No degree, no classroom, just years of getting into businesses, figuring out what was wrong and working through it until it was right. And somewhere along the way, I got to a point where I was regularly working through problems that stumped accountants with actual degrees. Not because I'm smarter than them, but because a degree tells you what someone studied. It doesn't tell you what they've seen or dealt with. There's a huge difference between those two things. And the more businesses I worked with, the more I noticed the same patterns. Owners paying for financial help, but not being able to tell others what that help was actually doing for them. Not because they were careless or checked out, but because nobody ever sat down and explained it. What does a bookkeeper actually do? What does an accountant do that a bookkeeper doesn't? And when does the CFO even come into the picture? Those are not complicated questions, but most people in this industry just assume you already know the answers. And if you don't, you end up paying for something without really knowing what you're getting. So that's what we're fixing today, right now. So let's get into it. So let's start with the bookkeeper because this is the foundation everything else is built on. And I mean that literally. A bookkeeper's job is the past. It's the entire job. Every dollar that came in, every dollar that went out, recorded accurately in your accounting software. That's it. That's the job. Day to day, that looks like recording transactions, reconciling your bank accounts, categorizing your expenses, and keeping everything current so that when you open your books, what you see actually reflects what happened in your business. Every transaction accounted for, every account verified, nothing's sitting there that you can't explain. And I want to be really clear about something here because I think this is where a lot of people get it wrong. Bookkeeping is not data entry. Those are not the same thing. A good bookkeeper has to actually understand accounting. They have to know how a transaction is categorized and why, and at least have a working knowledge of how those decisions can affect your taxes. Because if someone is just punching numbers into a system without understanding what those numbers mean or where they belong, that's not bookkeeping. That's just data entry. And the difference between the two can cost you a lot of money come tax time. And okay, that might sound simple, but think about it this way. If your bookkeeper is recording things in the wrong categories, transactions are sitting there unreconciled for months, or personal expenses are getting mixed in with business ones, everything downstream is wrong. Your reports are wrong, your tax prep is wrong, any decision you make based on those numbers is wrong. So yeah, it's not really flashy work, but it is really important work. Now, here's the thing though. A clean set of books is not the finish line. It's actually the starting line because recording what happened and actually understanding what it means for your business, those are two completely different jobs. And that's where the accountant comes in. So here's what I want you to understand first. An accountant can do everything a bookkeeper does, and a lot of them do, but that's not where the value stops. And that's a really important distinction. The difference is that an accountant takes those recorded numbers and helps you understand what they're actually telling you. Where is the money going? Is your pricing actually covering your costs? And if you're working with a tax accountant specifically, they're also looking at what your tax liability might look like before it shows up as a surprise. Now, not every accountant does taxes. That's actually its own specialty. But interpretation of your numbers is really where an accountant adds value, regardless of their focus area. And let me give you a really concrete example of what that looks like in practice. Say you had a really busy month. Revenue came in at 80,000 and you're feeling good about it. But then you look at your net profit and it's 12,000 and you're sitting there like, where did the rest of it go? A bookkeeper recorded every transaction that explains that gap, but an accountant is the one who sits down with you and actually walks you through it. Labor was up here, your cost of goods ran higher than usual here, you had these one-time expenses here. This is an accountant conversation, not a bookkeeper conversation. So if the bookkeeper answers what happened, the accountant answers, what does it mean? Here's the thing, there's actually a third question that most small business owners never even think to ask. And honestly, it might be the most important question of all. So that third question, the one most business owners never think to ask, is what's coming? And that is the CFO's territory, where the bookkeeper is looking at the past and the accountant is helping you understand what it means. A CFO is almost entirely forward-looking. They take the clean data and the interpretation and use it to help you make decisions about what happens next. Can I actually afford to hire someone right now? What happens to my cash flow if I open a second location? If revenue drops 20% next quarter, does my business survive it? Those are CFO level questions. And the tools they use for this are things like cash flow forecasting, scenario modeling, and many more that I'm not going to get into. So instead of just looking at what you made, you're looking at what you're going to need. And that distinction is huge because a lot of business owners find out too late that a great month in revenue doesn't always mean a great month for cash. Timing matters. Expenses don't always line up with income the way you'd hope. And here's the thing, you don't necessarily need a CFO to get ahead of this. If you have the right system in place to track and manage your cash flow, you can be really proactive about knowing what's coming in your business without having to hire anyone. The CFO just takes that to a higher level of strategy and complexity when you need it. Now, here's something really important I want you to understand about this role. A CFO without accurate books is essentially working with bad information. If the foundation isn't clean, if the bookkeeping is off, then everything a CFO builds on top of is also off. The whole thing only works when all three layers are working together. The good news for small business owners is that you don't need a full-time CFO to get this kind of thinking in your business. A lot of CFOs work on a fractional or virtual basis, meaning you get that strategic forward-looking support without the full-time salary that comes with it. So now you've got all three roles, but here's where it gets really interesting. And honestly, this is the part of the conversation that I think matters the most. Here is the part that I really want you to pay attention to, because this is where a lot of business owners get tripped up. The label someone puts on their website or their business card does not define the work they're actually doing for you. And I cannot stress that enough. Some bookkeepers do everything: recording, interpreting, advising, helping you think through decisions, and they charge accordingly because the value they're bringing is way beyond just keeping the normal books. Some accountants do nothing more than basic bookkeeping, hand you a report at the end of the month that you don't fully understand, and they never explain it. And some CFOs only do cash flow forecasting and budgeting and never actually touch your books at all. So you can have a bookkeeper who is doing accountant level work and charging for it, and you can have an accountant who is doing nothing more than what a basic bookkeeper will do. Their title does not tell you which one you have, and this is something I've seen over and over again in real businesses. Someone hired an accountant because they thought they meant they were getting a higher level of service, but what they were actually getting was someone who recorded their transactions, sent them a report they didn't understand, and called it a month. That's not getting the full value of what an accountant should be doing for you. And on the flip side, I've worked with bookkeepers who were doing genuinely sophisticated work that most accountants would charge significantly more for. So the right question to ask is not, do I have a bookkeeper or an accountant? The right question is, what is this person actually doing with my numbers? And is it enough for where my business is right now? That's it. That's the whole thing. Because the title without the right scope of work behind it is just a word. So let's talk about credentials, because I think there's a lot of confusion here and I want to clear it up once and for all. A CPA, which stands for Certified Public Accountant, is a real credential. That carries real weight. The CPA exam is very difficult. It's often compared to the bar exam in terms of what it takes to pass, and the people who earn that designation went through years of education and rigorous testing to get there. That isn't nothing. If you need audited financial statements or there's a legal required task that needs a licensed professional to sign off on it, a CPA is what you need for that. But outside of those specific situations, a degree or a credential does not automatically mean better work or insight into your business. I say that as someone who is completely self-taught. Everything I know came from being inside real businesses, figuring out what was wrong and working through it. And what I've learned is that the kind of knowledge that actually moves the needle for a business owner is almost always earned in the field, not in a classroom. Think about something like food cost tracking for a restaurant, or understanding how tips and payroll interact in your books, knowing how a service business handles cash flow gaps between invoicing and actually getting paid. That stuff is not learned in a textbook. You learn it by doing it over and over in real businesses. So when you're evaluating someone to help with your finances, the question isn't, do you have a degree? The question is, have you worked with businesses like mine, and can you show me what that would look like? Because industry experience matters a lot. But honestly, the right person for your business might not have worked in your specific industry at all. What matters more is that they understand your business, they communicate clearly, they're proactive, and you actually trust them. That combination will take you farther than a credential on a wall ever will. And hey, if this got you thinking about whether the financial help you have is actually doing enough for your business, I put together something that I think you're really going to want. It's called Getting Reports Every Month Does Not Mean Your Books Are Right. And it goes deeper into exactly that, because getting a report and having books you can actually use to make decisions are two very different things. So the link is in the description. Go grab it.